Good evening, all. So it's a great pleasure to have you all with us for the Masterclass session 7. Like you know, we just finished Christmas yesterday, and Santa is gone back. But we've got Biju sir here, who is going to deliver us the best gift of all, his wisdom and enlightenment. To introduce the speaker, uh, I really did not have to do much. This was the easiest session of masterclass in terms of communication because Biju sir, Biju Dominic is a very well-known figure, a very well-accepted speaker, and a tech evangelist who is in high demand. So after completing his engineering in mechanical from 1987, he did his MBA from XIM Bhubaneswar, and by 1990 he entered advertising as a client servicing executive and moved on up the ranks. So he's worked with companies like HTA, which is Hindustan Thompson Associates, which is currently known as JWP. From there, he moved on to Lindas, from there to Mudra, and in 2007, he started his own consultancy firm, FinalMile Consulting, and he is the CEO of FinalMile Consulting. And in 2018, his company is tied up with Fractal, and he is now one of the most sought after intelligence and tech professional in the country. So without further ado, over to you, Biju sir. Take us away.
Just a sound check and my audio and my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, Biju.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, hi everyone, fellow CETians. It's a great honor to be talking to all of you. CET obviously has, and I'm really grateful to Mumbai CET Alumni Association for giving me this opportunity, because CET, of course, has influenced my thinking. It has really helped me to be what I am today. So it's always an honor to speak with fellow CETs. I'm going to speak about the marriage of the mind and the machine. So we know about human intelligence. In the recent years, we've been hearing about artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of discussions about how is it, what will one be the other, or will both of them actually come together and actually work towards to make the world a better place to live in. And that's exactly what I'm going to discuss in the next 45 to 50 minutes. All engineers, I think definitely we engineers live in the world of machines. To be honest, I should, although often said that I'm a technology person, I should admit that I never ever claim that I've got anything to do really with technology. For that matter, I often tell people that I don't even tell people that I studied in CET. I often tell people I am a CET പോയി എന്ന് മാത്രം പറയാറുള്ളൂ. പഠിച്ചു എന്ന് ഞാൻ പറയാറില്ല, because most of my colleagues who were in my classes in 1987 batch know that I wasn't at all someone who was interested in the world of technology and engineering. But I think engineering per se, of course, I think we live in the world of machines. And I think one of the best books, or maybe one of the best thoughts that really came on to really explain the relationship as to where between human intelligence and machine intelligence was this Pulitzer-winning book by Gottzelescher and Back by Douglas Hofstadter. And I think this book was written in 1979. And therein he said that all intelligence is just variations, and to really get the true intelligence, the AI workers will have to keep pushing closer and closer to the brain mechanism if they really wish to, for the machines to attain the levels which they really want to have. Now, this is 1979, wherein what we are trying to say is that, yes, if really the machines have to become really more and more intelligent, the machines will have to become more like the human brain. But I know in the last 10 years, and if you really take it, maybe it started 20 years back, things have changed. And more so with this new whole development of machine learning, deep learning coming in, I think there is some fundamental shift in our perceptions about machine intelligence and human intelligence. And one of the most significant moments of the superiority, as we would call, of machine intelligence was 2016, when AlphaGo, which was developed by DeepMind, took on lead on the game of Go, which we know is a far more complex game than even chess. And the game number 2, 37th move, the world said, wow, what is this? Because that move was something where, the 1,000-year-old history of Go, there's no way anyone said a human being would have made that, because as soon as this was made, people said the machine has lost the game. But much later, they realized that this move was just beyond humans. Humans could never in the history of the more than 1,000 years of history of the Go game, humans could never think of such a move. And that 37th move in the second game of that game was a very significant moment in the history of machine intelligence, wherein we said machine intelligence no more has to now copy human intelligence. It can actually outsmart. The story doesn't end there. A few years within that, just about a year or so back, I think DeepMind developed the AlphaGo Zero, which just played against each other for just 3 days, and beat AlphaGo, left, right, and center. And that set the whole, thinking in a very, very different way. And that's when I think the terms like AI fallacy started really coming in. And then slowly, I think we started saying that, this belief that, machines have to become as close to human intelligence as possible, or will have to replicate human brain if they have to come up with something intelligent, is no more being held true. And I think in the 2020 book, a very significant book in 2020, is one of the best, it's been one of the best books, they say came out in 2020. I think Daniel Susskind said, machines are no longer riding the coattails of human intelligence. And obviously, which means the machines are charting their own path, which is independent of is no more about replicating or copying human intelligence. And of course, the next move out from there, which is task encroachment, which is the machines are definitely are bound to take on more and more of the work that has been so far been done by human beings. Of course, I think it is going to be now be taken over by machine. It's not too far away. So the obvious question that's in front of all of us is, that means, is the human-machine conflict, is it really inevitable? It looks like machines are moving in one direction, definitely going beyond it. They don't have to depend on human intelligence anymore. They're outsmarting human intelligence. And not just that, they're just taking away all the jobs that humans were doing. Now machines can easily now go and take it away. Now, in order to answer this particular question, I have to sort of slightly go back to my work from 2013 on. And, because to answer, this whole understanding of human mind and human brain, 2013, I co-founded FinalMile. And I don't know, not many people would know, it was also co-founded, and my another co-founder was the CETAA 94 batch, Anand Wanda. Rameshwaran of 94 Tele was my co-founder. So we, along with two other people, we co-founded a company called FinalMile. And FinalMile was the first firm in the world to take learnings from cognitive neuroscience, behavioral economics, and design, and look at human behavior in a very, very different way. And I remember Richard Taylor, who won the Nobel Prize much later, meeting me in Chicago booth because he had invited me to take a few sessions in Chicago booth. He was very surprised that a firm sitting in Mumbai was actually using some of these cutting-edge knowledge of human behavior and was trying to look at human behavior in a very different way. And in FinalMile, we came across lots of human behavior problems. And some of them were clearly what I would call, the interfaces or the conflicts or interactions between humans and the machines. And one of them was Mumbai suburban system. Now, Mumbai suburban system is obviously, it's an engineering marvel. And if you look at the mechanical engineering of it, the electrical engineering of it, the signaling of it, it's an outstanding system. It's brilliant from an engineering point of view. But it's got a problem. 10 to 12 people die every day in Mumbai. That's across the railway tracks. And railway has been trying to do lots of things to stop that. They just couldn't. 10 to 12 is a large number. That is the single largest cause of unnatural death in Mumbai city. And railway heard of us and heard of our approach to human behavior. They came to us and said, hey, can you guys really straighten out, what's really happening between this, this engineering or human, let's call it human versus engineering interface. Or, our roads. Look at some of the, the last few years, last decade or so, maybe I think our engineers have built some of the best roads in this country. Golden Quadrangle, the Mumbai-Pune highway. At the same time, our engineers also have built some of the, extremely safe and extremely good automotive, all around. But despite all that, I think we have 300,000 people dying every year on the roads of India. And better the roads, the number of accidents are more and more. For example, Bombay-Pune highway is actually one of the best roads that you can drive on. But per kilometer, that is for the highest number of accidents in India. Why? Or, some of, I'm sure our engineers, I think, looked at, because the government of India said, we need to build toilets, to make sure that our people don't defecate in the open, because that's a huge health hazard. Can you guys come up with, low cost and other materials and all that? So obviously some of the best minds really came in and said they built large number of toilets all around the country. Lakhs and lakhs, if not crores of toilets were built in a very short time. But soon after it was built, the government came to us and said more than 50 to 60% of those toilets are not used. Can you guys really find out why it is not being used? And can you guys really find out how can you get the people to use these toilets? I think my team, went a bit deeper to really know, to find answers to these and other questions that came our way. And one of the things I think we knew was that there is a traditional approach dealing with human behavior. We might have learned that in our colleges, in our schools, or I think that belief system continues. That one, and the core of that belief is that man is a rational being. Humans are all about, we have the ability to collect information, process all that particular information, and take the most optimum decision. And while taking those decisions, we are very conscious. We know what we are doing. We know what the benefits are. We know what the consequences are. And I think we are able to analyze these and then take our decision. And this has been the fundamental construct of human behavior that has actually driven all that we have done so far. And I think from here emanated our approach to dealing with human behavior. And whenever there is a problem, I think our typical answer is build awareness. So people are driving fast, tell them to drive slowly. People are crossing the railway tracks, tell them it's dangerous. There's rapes happening, violence against women. No, tell them, no, that's not something they're supposed to do. Build awareness. And I think awareness building has been given as a solution to handle any issue that we really come in. Because at the core of it, we said man is a rational being. Of course, we tell him what the consequences are, they will understand, and obviously, he will actually behave the right way. Now, let me, when we talk about, this whole awareness building, I just want to take you to, maybe one of the most sophisticated machines that the engineers would have ever built. That is nothing but an aeroplane, and the best aeroplane. I think obviously some of our Shaji and others are all experts in this, so they would know how sophisticated it is. That it is extremely intelligent and is able to do. And one of those machines was landing in Mangalore on 22nd of May 2010. Obviously, there wasn't much to be needed by the pilots while the flight took off from Dubai, and as it was approaching. So the chief pilot, Captain Gluziga, was an extremely experienced pilot. He's got more than 10,000 hours of flying time. He went off to sleep, which he's allowed to sleep. And and the co-pilot was just there, generally chatting, and generally coffee. He didn't have much to do. But because Mangalore is a tabletop airport, the DGCI insists that not just the co-pilot, but the chief pilot has to take control. So about 15 minutes before he was to land, Captain Gluziga wakes up, gets on control, and he's about to land. Just a minute or so before he was to land, 1, 2, 3, 4 times he gets an indication from the machine that we are far too high, and obviously they're asking him to go down, do a go around, and then come at a lower altitude and land. Not just the machine, because the machine was giving all the indication. The captain, the co-pilot was seeing it, and 1, 2, 3, the 3 times the co-pilot is telling Captain Gluziga, "Sir, we are far too high. Let's do a go around." So just few minutes before he was to land, Captain Gluziga had 7 warnings not to land. But Captain Gluziga landed. Obviously, it was far too there, and then he also there's a mistake, and we know what happened. And 169 people and Captain Gluziga died in that accident. Now, as the Boeing representative in the inquiry commission, it seems, asked, if someone gets 7 warnings and that person still decides not to take those warnings, what can we do? And this also tells us a lot about what machines can do. Yes, the machine did its job to some extent, but somewhere still that couldn't prevent one of the worst accidents, air accidents in this country. Was it lack of awareness? Or I think these are some of the incidences, and these are some of the things that made me and my team think very differently about human behavior. I think that set us thinking and said, let's understand this whole human behavior in a far more deeper way than what has happened ever in the history of the world. And I think we started studying the whole interface between the mind and the machine, the brain and the machine, and not so much from a machine point of view, which I'm sure the engineers are doing an extremely good job of it. I think we started looking at it from the human side. And the interesting thing was, I think one of the statements that really changed my mind was somewhere in the mid-90s was this, which is Francis Crick's statement saying, use your joys and your sorrows when your ambitions, your sense of free will, and in fact no more than a vast assembly of lost cells and their associated molecules. So nothing but he's saying all that about human behavior is about the electrochemical reactions that happen between the ears. If we can really understand what happens between our ears, I think we can really understand human thoughts, and also we can understand human behavior. The human brain is the organ of human behavior. And the more we understand the electrochemical reactions that happen out there, I think we are able to understand human behavior even more. And I think one of the most interesting things was this whole understanding of the human brain didn't really come from any engineering laboratory, because most of the most intriguing and interesting work that is happening on human behavior and how the human brain functions is actually coming in from the sports field. So I have to take you to the sports field. And I'm sure people of my generation would still remember the 2003 World Cup, where Sachin Tendulkar was, on a glorious, innings. Where that's a game where he showing up the 6 on the first over and all that. And we all still remember when he came to 92, he developed cramps and he could run. And I'm sure the whole of India and all of us say, hey, Sachin, take a runner, take a runner. But Sachin didn't take a runner. And when he came to 96, there was a rising ball that happened, and obviously because he was very cramped because of his cramp, and he was caught and he got out. And then the whole of India was wondering, why did not Sachin take a runner? Now, here is an interview that Harsha Bhogle did with Sachin Tendulkar after the game was over and after when India was playing in England. And just listen to this particular interview.
While I was thinking that, was I moving correctly or not and all that, those minor details I would have to look at and then figure out whether I was doing it correctly or it can get better.
So really what you're saying is it's a waste of time for us to analyze your technique because you don't know what's in your head anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
You said something very interesting when we chatted after the World Cup, and you said how in your mind you started running a single before you've actually played the ball. And so what we did, I don't know if you know this, when you were in England during the one days, we actually had the stump mics up for a while, and on 2 successive deliveries you actually said 1 and the second time said 2 before you played the ball.
Did I? Oh,
yes, yes you did. Of course. We actually turned that up, yeah.
Now, I can tell you that, this interview has actually, this opens up so much of new understanding about human behavior. One, now here is, I think, many times after people have done something, I'm sure inquiry commissions and something else and all, I'm sure many of you would have been members of our belief is that people know why they did what they did. Now, here is a man who's supposed to be one of the most knowledgeable about what he does in life, or what he does at least on the field, that he has a tendency of saying 1 before the ball is bowled, and he plays that for a 1. Or he says 2, and later on in the interview he goes and they say, yeah, I know it's a 4, and I know I'm going to hit that for a 4. Now, but when he was told that you do that, he said, why? Oh, I never knew. That means he was doing something and he wasn't even really aware of it. Okay, that's a separate one. But the most interesting facet is that here is Sachin Tendulkar, I think, saying 1 or a 2 or a 4 before the ball is bowled, and he actually plays that for a 1 or 2 or a 4. I know how many of you have done, the mathematics of playing, a tennis ball. Sorry, a cricket shot. Sorry, in cricket. The same is the mathematics of in baseball, the same is in tennis, from a time perspective. So, for example, a ball that is bowled at about 145 kilometers per hour, crosses the 22 yards in about 0.45 seconds. So, which means less than half a second, the ball from the bowler's hand reaches the batsman. That's the time. So, that means he has to take all his decision making has to happen within 0.45 seconds. Studies have shown, for example, I said this because a lot of work has happened in this area. For this particular man, and a lot of people says, yes, the decision on what shot to play is taken by the last ball as he is releasing, which means the image of this has to fall on the retina of the batsman, which they say happens almost in 0 seconds, and almost no time is required. But from after that, once that image has fallen, he has to now process what could be the ball that he's actually going to bowl. And studies have shown it takes about 0.16 to 0.22. So let's take an average of about 0.2 seconds is what it takes. That means he has to analyze, this is third ball of the over, the previous one I had hit for a boundary, this is a field placement, this is Perth and this is not Adelaide. So there are lots of variables are involved to decide what could be this particular ball. But in about 0.2 seconds, I think that decision is taken. So once I have an understanding that this is the ball that's going to come in, and this is the height at which the ball will reach, I have to lift my bat, I have to take the bat back, then I have to bring the bat exactly in the center. And with the fastest bat swing, studies have shown it takes about 0.2 seconds to do that particular action. So 0.2 plus 0.2 is 0.4 seconds. The time that is now available for you in between to say, what shot should I play here? Should I there? Should I do it? It's about 0.04, 02, whatever. It's less than, obviously 0.05 seconds is what we have to take that particular decision. Now, obviously, you might ask, Biju, conscious, non-conscious, where is it happening? Now, I also have to take another, facet of sports to just give you a perspective of what this real timing is. And that is, in 100 meters or 200 meters, just as we are about to begin, obviously our legs are at, are touching a very extremely sensitive, computer, because that's going to detect whether you started early or not. So what does starting early mean? What is the time at which you start? You will actually be disqualified. So I think, sports, psychologists, neuroscientists, and sound engineers all have said, if I'm standing here and then the gun goes off, that for the sound to reach his ears and for him to just react, there's no processing. Unlike in cricket, he has to just only move. I think that time is 0.1 second. The 0.1 second, if you start before that, you will be disqualified in Olympics or in World Cup. So 0.1 second is the threshold of conscious processing. Now you take cricket, you take tennis, you take baseball, the processing time that people have is 0.02 to point, that means it's far below the threshold of consciousness. Now, since we are at the mathematics, also I just want to tell you, since 2 second is the threshold of processing that's required, that is why the late swinging ball is an impossible shot to play, which means if the ball is approaching and the ball takes a deviation in the last 0.2 seconds in its trajectory in a way that was different from what was sort of imagined, it's impossible for the batsman because there's no time for him to process. The only thing he can do is to stop there. But the most interesting thing I want to tell you is the sports psychologists at Oxford and obviously a lot of US universities who are studying how does the brain function. But one of the things that you really see is that I think a lot of processing is really happening at a non-conscious level in matters of 0.01 and 0.05 seconds. I mean, the human decision making is happening in those milliseconds. And one other very important thing is, our brain has about 11 million plus bits of processing capacity. Of that, I think, almost 10 million of them are in our eyes, but sitting in the non-conscious level. Just look at the amount of, bits that are available at a conscious level. 40 plus 50 plus 5 plus 1 plus 1. Now, this whole belief that we had, that we are all conscious is a very important thing, is all getting demolished in the last 10 years, 15 years, with more and more learnings coming in from the world of neuroscience. Which means, I think our traditional understanding of the universe of human behavior has fundamentally shifted. What we thought the rational, conscious man is what human beings are all about. But today, neuroscience would establish very, very categorically that we are predominantly 99.999 part of our processing happens at a non-conscious level. And unless we are able to understand this non-conscious, we are not able to understand human behavior. But this is a startling discovery. And there's one other thing which is about emotions. And that's again, neuroscience would say, I know traditionally we have always believed that rationality and emotions are two separate things. Don't bring emotions into your decision making, because that would spoil any decision making. But today, neuroscience is saying that emotions are involved in all decisions. And if the emotional parts of the brain are not able to do its job, I think we will not be able to take a rational decision, which means there is nothing called a rational decision. So these are some paradigm shifting thoughts that are emerging about human behavior. I think Shankar Vedantam of the Washington Post in his book Hidden Brain, I think put this very well. It says very well. And he said, this new understanding of behavior constitutes a revolution no less intriguing, perhaps more powerful than the discovery that the sun really does not revolve around the earth. And many a time in the last 10, 15 years, I've been, podium to podiums, I've been telling the world, hey, 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 like Galileo long back. He's saying, hey, 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 hey. Our understanding of human behavior is fundamentally shifted. We need to change with that. It's not easy. It's not easy to convince, and get the people to, to get, in the newer ways of thinking, because the thinking is not incremental. It's just paradigm shifting. But I think at FinalMile, I think we managed to take this learning to solve some of the problems that I just mentioned. For example, when my team and I went to the railway tracks of Mumbai, I think the first thing we realized is that wherever the accidents were happening, I can see a train easily coming in. And so we said, why is it? How can a person get hit by a train that he can see coming in? And that's where neuroscience started giving us answers. Neuroscience told us that our brain has a deficiency. Our brain evolutionarily was very good in judging the speed of, small things like a rabbit or a deer. As it was running, our forefathers could judge the speed of it and throw the spear perfectly and then kill it and have the breakfast that particularly. But evolutionarily, we haven't seen large objects like elephants and giraffes move fast. And we started seeing large objects move fast, trains or ships or whatever, the last 150 years or 200 years. And 150 years, 200 years is too short a time to make any impact on the basic construct of the brain. So when I'm looking at a large thing like a train coming in, I think, I can cross. And I start taking my steps to the track. But as I reach the track, I realize the train is much closer than what it is. Because we underestimate the speed of a large object by close to 40%. And that is an insight that neuroscience told us. And that is why that machine-human interface was actually getting affected, because that judgment was completely going wrong. Now, how do you solve it? So for that, I think I went into a lot of other, existing solutions of how such things are managed. And I went, for example, looked at what the automotive engineers have done. And obviously they make some of the most sophisticated cars and the automotives in the world, and they obviously have, the most beautiful looking rear view mirror, but in the rear view mirror they have written something. The objects in the mirror are closer than what they appear. Now, I want to ask the engineer, has your brain managed to see that object closer than what it is? Or have you done something which is purely for a legal point of view? You've done your job. Yeah, I've told you it's closer than what it is. Now, don't blame me for it. Now, this to me is actually one of the worst, one of the best examples of how I think we engineers haven't really understood human behavior. If this was the way, once I had that previous insight that, we underestimate the speed of large objects, I think my team could have put up boats across Bombay by saying that trains are faster than what you think, so be careful. Very conscious to the conscious communication. And I think maybe I would have said, I've solved the problem. And I knew, having understood how the brain works, that's not going to work. So I pushed my team to sort of look, how does the brain judge speed? After reading, I think we realized that the brain can judge speed only if there is a reference point. As it happens on a flight, I can't judge the speed when I'm up there. It's because there are no reference points. So I can't judge the speed of a flight. So I said, if reference point is very important, can we actually provide a reference point when people are trespassing across the railway tracks? And that's what my design team did. The places where people trespass is the constant place. Now this is what I love. Just not where the cross to the left side in the direction of the train. 5 sleepers are painted yellow, 15 are left empty, another 5 are painted, 15 are left empty. And there are blobs of about 5 blobs there. When the train comes from there, the speed at which yellow lines disappear under the train becomes a reference for this particular person of the speed at a non-conscious level. People do not know that now you ask people in Vadara, later this was done in Thane, Mumbai and Kalba and all that. You ask people what those yellow lines are for, they'll say, sir, I don't know, sir. I think normally we cross roads, they draw yellow lines, but this is for something else. This is, I think, for the motormen. That means we have influenced their behavior without they actually being consciously being aware of. But we have reduced the trespassing death wherever this was implemented by 75%. The same insight was taken to solve the problem on the roads. Now, as I said, this is Bangalore Hyderabad highway. A lot of dark, what we call, the dark spots where a lot of accidents are happening. And we know it's because people are obviously crossing from the villages, and the main carriageway, people are going at 120, 140 kilometers per hour. And obviously we need to get them to slow down. And the traditional solutions are slow down, danger ahead, accidents have happened, so be careful. We know none of it will work. But I think my team said, okay, how does the person judge whether first of all, driving is one of the most non-conscious activities you can ever do. Because we are speaking mostly to our partner with which gear, is the leg on the accelerator, is it on the brake? None of it is consciously thought. We are doing our own little thing as we are driving. But how does our brain decide whether a leg should be on the accelerator or on the brake? We don't look at the speedometer at all during a drive. But I think one of the things we realize is our brain judges how things are going past us. So he said, let's play a trick on that. So what did the team do? The team drew these wide lines, perpendicular lines across the road. But what the team did was, we actually reduced the distance between these lines as it approached the danger spot. So what it does to you is the lines are moving, suddenly the wide lines, the lines are moving much faster. And your leg automatically moves from the accelerator to the brake. And speed gun studies showed us that we managed to reduce the speed from 30% to 52%. And in that process, we managed to overall reduce accidents in the highways, across 15 highways in this country, by close to 60%. I said, when we asked them, why you not using the toilets? People said, sir, outside I can do it very fast, but inside it takes a very long time, sir. Now, I know you might have laughed. How can that? The same defecation act, when it's done on the field, he says it takes much lesser time, whereas inside it's taking a longer time. But I think when we look through the lens of neuroscience, we realize there is something called circadian clock inside our brain. And our circadian clock is constantly keeping our passage of time, right from we get up to, makes us hungry at certain time, makes us sleep at certain time in the afternoon, makes us tired in the afternoon, makes us sleep towards the end, all that. And I think the key input for circadian clock is actually sunlight. And it is picking up at an unconscious level what the sunlight is, comes up, brightens up, and it goes down, it picks up. Now, I think when you're in a dark place, your circadian clock does not get any input, and it gets all, orbing. And that is a very, very distressing scenario. And that is why it is actually one of the most powerful interrogation techniques, where you just completely disorient the person, because don't give him any light input, or give him only one constant light input and just make him completely disoriented about it. And we realize that's exactly what is happening in these places, because obviously electricity is a luxury in all these places. But why they built these toilets, they didn't think of the role of the circadian clock, and so they didn't really give much importance to it. But once we knew it, my team did was they actually cut a little window out there, obviously put a curtain out there for privacy, and sunlight entered. We found the usage of the toilets actually dramatically increased. Now, this also, I think, many times I'm sure there might be civil engineers and, architects in there. When we look at our old government offices and a lot of them, we would have seen all those clocks sitting there, and we would have said, government office, they don't want to work, and that's why the clock is every time they're looking at it. But today, when I know what's the circadian clock, I would actually say, if you are construct a room and there's no way sunlight can enter, please give him a very prominent way, and the passage of time can actually be seen, so that your productivity can dramatically go up by actually having such large clocks out there. Now these are all instances to tell you that, and as I said, not just these. We work on managing HIV in Africa. We're looking at managing non-trafficking in India, rape victims, managing their rehabilitation in India, e-learning, getting integrity within organizations, financial inclusion, a lot of projects I think we've done. And in all of them, I think what we found is that this new understanding of human behavior that is emanating from the understanding of the functioning of the human brain is really giving us some brilliant insights about how our humans behave. And that is really helping us to come up with solutions which otherwise wouldn't have really existed. And so I think one of the things I want to mention is that I think obviously now you can see the more we are getting into the brain, obviously we're getting a far better understanding of this. And I showed you multiple scenarios where there was an interaction between the human and let's call the machine or the technology. But I think once we understood that from a human point of view, obviously human brain point of view, I think we are able to manage quite a few of those conflicts and I think solve some of those regulations. So we're already doing it. But what about the future? And I think the future of human machines, I think to me are in a very interesting 3-4 directions are emerging out from there. One, we know some of the best discoveries in the world are happening in the world of pharmaceuticals. Whichever the diseases are, I think pharma companies are managing to come up with very, very interesting molecules to solve this particular problem. But they have a fundamental issue. And what is that issue? Despite reminders, even in life and death situations, people have been asked to take those medications, but people are not taking the medication. Tuberculosis, blood pressure, BP, hypertension. Now, it's an area called medical adherence or medical non-adherence. The insurance companies in the US alone are losing about $350 billion. That means they've made the best medicine, but finally we are not able to get the person to put that medicine into his mouth every day in the morning. And that is causing a huge problem. I know one of the areas where a large amount of work is happening is in terms of, detecting, what we call scenario planning and detecting, what the things are happening around there. We know the US has some of the best expertise in looking at viruses and how that could spread. They have the best technology to predict where it would go. I'm sure all the modelings and all that was there. I'm sure all those experts stood there and went to this particular man who was the final critical man who was supposed to take that decision and told him, sir, I think we need to do something about He just looked at all the data and said, it's just another flu. Now, a lot of people actually forget that this is not the first time that happened. In our own state of Kerala, what happened when that information that came in with Cyclone Oki? It was an unusual cyclone of an unusual time, and we didn't take that day. Or what happened when our first flood came our way? Unusual. And one of the most intriguing, and I'm sure some of you would have read that article in Harvard Business Review, the day before Hurricane Katrina, or it opened up, data after data was coming in. And Matthew Broderick, who was the head of Inland Securities, he had all the data in front of him. But somewhere he just kept all that, got into his car, and went home, believing nothing is going to happen. Why? Why did Matthew Broderick behave that particular way? Why did President Trump behave this particular way? Is it because our Chief Minister in Kerala or whatever are not concerned about people? Unlikely. But there is a fundamental problem with our brain. Our brain is not able to absorb information about an incident that has never happened, or of which the probability of happening is very, 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 very low. So I know we are creating some of the best anomaly detection techniques in the world, where anomalies that can happen 1 in a million, and I think we have systems to track it. But that's the people who are supposed to take action based on it. Are they ready for it? I think that whole ability to absorb new technology is very, very, very poor. And there is a lot where the human behavior experts will have to work. The people who are developing this technology, whether it's in pharma, whether it's in anomaly detection, whether it's in climate control, in all of them, I think we need to have a very strong cooperation between the human behavior experts and technology experts to come in, so that what the technology, the news that they're bringing in, is being accepted by the human being and the appropriate actions are taken. The other very interesting development is in the area of, obviously, the tools that we develop. Humans have always developed tools to make, earlier I'm sure someone would have drawn a line and said, oh, this is a straight line. But someone said, oh, let me have a ruler, and I can now do straight lines in a much faster and maybe far more perfect straight line than what it was before. The tools always, I think, improve our ability, because we could focus on far more important facets of discovery. Look at telescope. Initially, when the telescope was developed, I'm sure it was nothing but people understood how our visual system works. And I think we worked based on lenses and other things were created, moved on. But as the telescope improved, and it came to radio telescope, it was nothing to do with the anatomy of the eye. For that matter, the radio telescope is not even, seeing. It is almost hearing it. I mean, it started going beyond what the human senses was doing. And today we know, in the last 10 years, one of the biggest debates about AI is that, including about the latest, the language writing, whatever, in MP3 software, is that we don't know what's really happening. So if you don't know what's happening, then how can I accept what the machine is? Now, it's an intriguing question. I wouldn't, put an answer right now, because only that I would remind, for example, the engineers what happened to nuclear energy as a technology. There's no doubt about it. Nuclear energy would have solved a lot of the energy problems as compared to coal and dams and a lot of other sources of energy. But today, almost every country has given up nuclear energy. Why? Because the number of people who died are from Long Island and then Fukushima, or less than obviously Russia, a few thousand people have died. But why is it that we have actually discarded nuclear energy, where only a few thousand people have died, vis-a-vis automotive, which has killed million more times people, is still being loved by people, whereas nuclear energy is being feared by people? It's because nuclear energy always remained as a set of things where it was completely unknown. And that unknown, not knowing about what it is all about, created a huge distance between humans and that technology. I think AI has to work very hard to make sure that, what happened to nuclear energy do not happen to AI as a technology. There are, when I speak to my AI colleagues in Fractal, I'm not at all an AI expert, but they tell me, I ask them, what are all the big challenges with AI? Obviously, he said, yeah, we're very good. It is about, supervised learning. Yes, I think we know it. But I think when it comes to unsupervised learning, when it comes to overall, obviously, artificial general intelligence or one-shot learning, or even, much simple things like, task A has been studied. But I think the moment we move to task B, the machine forgets a lot of what has happened on task A, whereas the brain doesn't forget. So there are a lot of areas where AI is really, has got miles to go. But the interesting thing is in all these, the human brain is doing a very good job. For example, one-shot learning. A baby's brain does a far better job than the best, the AI machine can do at this point of time. So there's a lot of areas where the AI can take actually learnings from the human brain. And my own belief is that that's not going to be just replicating what happened to the brain and then putting it onto the machine. It could work in two broad areas. One, it could actually be as a validator. Oh, this is what the brain does. The brain does this. This is what the brain does with the neurons, and this is what it does with the plasticity of the neurons, and that's how it happens. Oh, can I then do that in my machine? Or can it become an inspiration, as it happened in the case of Go or a lot of other areas where I just know how the brain works, but I think I just want to do it better, and it can actually work as an inspiration. And one other big area is, of course, the brain also. There's a lot of work in the last 10, 15 years where governments are pumping in billions of dollars into it. And one of those projects was the Human Connectome project, which Obama administration really initiated along with some of the other universities. And what was that project all about? The project was trying to actually take the human brain. It's got about 86 billion neurons, and each of them has about 1,000 to 10,000 synthetic connections. So it's almost 200 to 250 trillion connections are there. And I think we are trying to now, almost, sort of make each of those connections broadly, make it into our map. Now, today I think they looked at 1 millimeter of a rat's brain, and they tried to create a connectome of that. I think our computer systems are still, are not able to grapple with it because it's a humongous task. Which means, the only way you can actually grapple with that is where you really bring in AI. Because one of the greatest things about AI is the ability to deal with big data. And the biggest data that you can ever have is the human brain. So how does this 86 billion with trillions of connections, how do they all, interact with each other? That is the biggest data project that you can ever have. So all the computing powers, all the big data capabilities of AI can actually be used, and it is being used to actually understand the brain. So what we're seeing today is that I think, obviously, as I said before, there are certain things that we can learn from the brain and we can bring it into AI. But AI itself would actually be the biggest bet that the neuroscience will have to help it get a better understanding of the human brain. So this is a very parallel process that is really emerging across the world. So I think when you're talking about the marriage of the mind and the machine, I'm a person who's very optimistic about it, that it will happen. Because as I said, I myself have seen that the more we understand, what's happening on the human brain, our ability to actually, create a far more, friendly, far more effective relationship with the machine dramatically goes up. And there are lots of new areas that are emerging in the world of AI itself, which can learn a lot from with the way the human brain is actually functioning. And so my overall belief is that, we know, and I think a lot of people who are on this talk are people who are married. And marriage is all about good understanding between partners. And so I'm a strong believer, and more so in the last 2 years, I've been working with my colleagues in Fractal. I've come to believe that the more we understand the inscrutable algorithms that happen between our ears, the better will be the technology we develop for our machines. But the more I speak to people, that is still both of them are sitting in two separate silos. Neuroscience is doing its own set of things. They're doing a lot of interesting work. AI is doing some very interesting work across days. But AI itself is also making a change. There's no doubt about it. The persons like Minsky of MIT and all, initially in the 80s and most in the 90s, I think somewhere up to 90s, they said, we will manage it our own, and made it very, very mathematical. Of course, it still has to be mathematics. There's no doubt about it. But in the last work from the last 10, 15 years, there's definitely been, mostly with deep learning, there's a far more a cooperation between neuroscience and artificial intelligence is emerging. And I have no doubt that when the world of the human brain, and which is human intelligence and artificial intelligence, come together, we will be able to work together and actually solve some of the most significant problems in the world, which so far has remained unsolved. So I'm looking forward to that future. Thank you.
Thank you, Biju. That was really absorbing talk. I will remove you. You're sharing now?
No, I'm not. I think I'll leave it for questions now. So
Okay. We have some questions which are there in the chat box, Q&A box. Okay, I'll pick them one by one. First, I will ask themselves to raise the questions. Mr. Ravindranath from Trivandrum. Hello.
Yes, I just wanted to know whether machine will take over human brain. And second thing, what is the level of penetration of AI in India in various sectors, especially in industries, medical, etc., etc. If any data available, please share with me. I'm interested in that.
As I said, the task encroachment, as they call it, is inevitable. It will happen. Machines will take over a lot of the routine jobs that were earlier being done by human beings, whichever field they're in, will be taken over by the machines, because machines will be able to do a far better job than what a human beings can do. Already, I think there are areas where AI is playing a very significant role. One of Fractal companies called Pure, I think we have developed, for example, an algorithm to read chest X-rays, and now it's also moved even to MRI, brain MRIs. And I think, we have obviously taken an algorithm based on more than 10 million chest X-rays. And I think the accuracy of reading of a chest X-ray is now far superior to what a human beings can do. And I think one of the first hospitals in which this algorithm was tested was the General Hospital in Trivandrum. In the last few months, I think we've obviously got approvals all around the world. So in a lot of medical diagnostics and other areas, AI will take over and will make the job of the doctors far more into, just obviously suggesting the solutions and not just into diagnostics. The same is in lots of other areas, image recognition. I'm not a complete expert in that, but I know wherever there's routine jobs, those jobs will, and with large amount of data already available, AI will take over from the human
Thank you so much for your answer. It was a wonderful presentation, knowing the human brain in details, and let it solve all problems which human surgery cannot do. AI can do one day. Thank you so much.
Look forward to that.
Thank you, Mr. Ravindranath. Next question. Actually, there are two questions from Vaishak. Vaishak, can you ask your question?
Hello, myself Vaishak. Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, sir. So my question is, what is your thought of using brain of a dead person to be developed as a computational system, as opposed to a silicon technology or quantum computing that is being developed as mainstream? That is my first question.
Vaishak, I'm not too sure once the person is dead, there is much you can do about much studies you can do with his brain. For example, Einstein's brain was taken after he has died, and they dissected it and they tried to make some sense out of it. Nothing really came out from there. So I think that's also been one of the constraints in our ability to understand the human brain, because obviously when the brain is really, alive, looking at it, obviously fMRI and EEG machines are there, but they are far more tougher to do that. So today a lot of work on the human brain is being done also in this little worm that I forget the term of it, but that's got, so the advantage with that worm is that the number of neurons, that is also about just about 500 or 600. There's a little fish out in California, Epilepskia, that the brain of that fish is being studied. A lot of work is happening, of course, in rats and in chicks. So a lot of work on neuroscience is actually being done in these animals and in these worms and fishes. But whenever there are work that's happening in human brain is whenever there are surgeries being done and when there are what we call problems that have happened, those brains are being studied. For example, when I spoke about the role of emotion, that was work based on an accident that happened to a person called Phineas Gage, where accidentally a rod went through his left eye and then came out on top of his head. He didn't die, but his brain was later studied and as to what happened. And then 12 other patients who also lost the same part of the brain because the tumors were studied. And then they combined that study and then they came out with this particular road. So it is a very complicated way for us to study, but slow and steady, but things are working. The Connectome project was trying to build a human brain so that a lot of these experiments could happen on that artificial brain, but looks like that's a very, 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 very tough job. So it is going to take some time for us to really get a good, working model of the brain.
Okay, fine, sir. So my second question is, when we were talking about Sachin Tendulkar, one question intrigued me. Actually, I follow F1 a lot. I was intrigued by the reflexive ability of an F1 driver, because the calculation in the where brain happen in a split second. We cannot expect such a reaction from a normal human being. So there is so much of accidents in a normal Indian road. Also, they are trained in such a way, so we cannot expect that from a normal human being, right? If F1 drivers are trained in such a way that they predict the future rather than being reactive to a particular event, is that right?
Yes, Vaishak. I think thank you for pointing that out. I think that's one of the biggest learnings about the human brain. Because I think because of our wrong understanding of the brain, and most of our engineers also being used to an input-output system is what we're all used to. So we also tend to think that brain is all about, the stimuli from outside being taken, and then, the sensory system takes it, processes all that, and then puts, an output. That's what we think the brain functions, but that's not the way the brain functions. The brain is not an input-output machine. The brain is an anticipating machine. And, as you rightly
That's a
said,
great insight, right?
yeah, it is an anticipating machine. And so that means as a child, I'm picking up lots of information. So as you said, whether Sachin Tendulkar or a player, I think years of experience tells me that okay, this bowler is going to have 8 possible options of balls he might bowl. As he's running in, as he sees the field placement, okay, tuck, tuck, okay, now 6, tuck, tuck. So he's reducing the number of options around there. And then finally he takes it. So it's always anticipation. And even when it's not just the Sachins of the world, as you're walking right now, you are anticipating it because from experience, there is a little step out there. And you put a leg up there because from your experience, you need to put your leg up. But when places where you are new, you will see that you are actually looking at it closely and then moving. But most of the time, we are always anticipating any situation. And then we're trying to say, did the situation live up to anticipation? Then the learning gets reinforced. If it didn't live up to the anticipation, something new happened, of course, a new set of learnings happen. So that's a great learning for us that as a brain, even of a normal person, we are always anticipating and we are not processing it as an input-output machine.
So one more question.
Sure.
Is that all right?
Please go ahead, of course.
Okay. So I also see that humans get better at something when he uses something for a long time. In an evolutionary perspective, what do you think that humans will become in terms of skill? Since we rely more on machines that make us less and less dexterous.
We know it. You repeat anything and your synaptic connection. It's almost like water flowing through field. And as the water flows more and more through it, that becomes more deeper and more pronounced. That's exactly what happens to electrical connections also. As you repeat an activity, that synaptic connections become stronger and stronger, and it becomes almost an automatic process there. But as you don't actually use it, it becomes very weak. And one of the most interesting examples is you take a 1-day-old baby and put the baby on the face to the water, and you'll actually see the 1-2 year day or no, the baby will start swimming because all of us are born with the ability to swim. But because we don't use that synaptic connections for a long time, obviously you put a 2-year-old baby in the water, the baby won't be able to swim. So so whatever synaptic connections are used more, it becomes stronger and stronger, and whichever is not used becomes weaker and weaker, and it will sort of wither away, and you will not be able to do that activity as fast as what you can ever do.
So this is developing technology actually making any sense in that perspective.
Yeah, some other things will go down, and a lot of people know that, our ability to walk. Earlier when we walked, I think our legs were better. Now we're sitting in a car and running around, our legs are not as efficient as what it was before, because we are not using our muscles the way it should be used. So machines will make some parts of ours redundant, no doubt.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Aishak. I will next one is from Ajit Kumar L. Ajit, can you please come online?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes. Oh, of course I do. I can hear you.
Good evening, Biju. I'm a regular reader of your Mint articles.
Thank you.
What I want to ask is that, behavioral scientists speak about a lot of biases. And whenever a decision is being made, some of these biases comes into picture. So I have 2 questions related to this. One is that how do you relate this to the conscious and non-conscious part of what you have spoken about? That is point number 1. And second thing is that how can a man-machine interface can actually minimize the effect of these biases on the decision making so that the overall system is effective?
Ajit, a very interesting and very important question. Biases again, it's a very interesting area of study. And all biases happen at an unconscious level. For that matter, a lot of us don't even know that we have bias. A lot of people would say, oh, no, I don't have any gender bias. I treat, the female, for example, as a male, I would say I treat them as equal. Or I don't have any race, or I don't have any religious bias. I'm very similar, but we are not. I think there are today tests that can be done. There is this Harvard professor of Indian origin, and it's called implicit cognition test. That test actually really, throw out all. Bring to surface the at least a few of the biases that we have. And also what we have found is that some of the AI, because AI finally, the coding and the algorithms are written by humans. I think when some of these, AI today being used to screen, for example, candidates, their biodata, and it seems into the biodata, the biases of the people, the gender bias and race bias and others have got in, and it is there in the algorithms of these AI. And today, I think one of the areas, obviously, we are working both at the human level and at the machine level, of course, differently, is to make sure that how do you understand these biases in advance, and how do we sort of remove that? What could be done to take care of them? It is a very significant area of work, and my own team definitely is also working in that particular area.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajit. Mr. Ram Kumar from Chennai.
So, can you hear me? Very good evening.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, of course I can hear you.
Yeah, certainly enjoyed your wonderful talk. Well articulated, Mr. Biju. In fact, just to introduce myself, I've been in a very senior management positions in the oil industry. I retired now in Chennai. It has been the play of emotions, basically play of emotions and the human behavior, which leads to team success. And what I have felt is the human brain is the best machine. Absolutely no way we can replicate it as of now. It is a play of emotions, decision making, irrationality at its best, anger, and the behavior patterns play a lot. The most important behavior pattern of any human being is the ego or the ahangar, which humans have. That in fact, the life without ego does not survive. So how do we factor in this ego or the ahangar into the AI system? What way can we do it?
Mr. Ramkumar, it is a million. I know it could be $1 billion question. If we can really answer that, I'm sure companies will, because that's where the AI people are completely clueless. How do you bring emotions into what they do? And as you rightly said, emotions are integral. Not just the hunger or any of the negative emotions. There are the positive emotions. Obviously, those are the positive emotions that drive us. It is our hunger for learning that making each of us sit and listen to each other and discuss these. There are a lot of positive emotions that drive our decisions on a daily basis. But how do you bring it all into a machine? Very little work is happening, and I think that's one of the areas where obviously I'm sure in future a lot of work will go in, because finally if the machines have to really be with the human beings, and especially in a lot of industries where emotions are also integral, and mostly because the adoption of technology is very poor. In a lot of cases, as you rightly said, in Ram Kumar, in the oil industry, for example, anomaly detection, for example, you have extremely good systems do that. But when person comes to this also, I think something's going to happen. Many times you tend to dismiss it, and maybe you sort of or experience and other things around there. So my point is, how do you bring an understanding of emotions into the machine is a huge, big area. A lot of work is happening in that area. But the other area there's already a fair bit of work is machines are trying to understand the emotions of the people. So, for example, I know social media like Facebook and others, they're keeping a tab by the words we use, the type of pictures we put, the type of tonality of our sentences and others. And there's a lot of work that's happening to understand the emotion of that particular person. And obviously, because they are interested in developing appropriate advertisement for that particular person or the product for that particular person. So there's also work in terms of studying the emotions of people. There's a lot of work with AI people are doing. But very interesting area, very early, very early days as far as this particular area is concerned.
I think I will add one more question. You see, I've been doing a lot of work on this water conservation and groundwater. The main, unless we recharge the water, as human beings, survival will be difficult. What I find is drilling it down to the humans, especially the educated and the affluent. They seem to be least bothered. And this could be a study. In case we are able, because the designs for this groundwater recharge, it is very simple. It is only the awareness and the will to do. In case maybe this particular factor can be studied, and if we can exchange some thoughts, it will be wonderful. Because without water, we humans cannot survive.
Yes, and I think in all of them, I think what we found is not lack of awareness. As I said, awareness is very high. In whether it's water conservation, whether it's rain harvesting, whether it's climate control, whether it's even exercising, it's not lack of awareness. All of us know what you're supposed to do, but there's what we call awareness action gap. But due to some reason, there is a gap between our awareness not leading into action. What we found in a lot of cases is that there is even intent. I mean, I have the intent to do it. That means the number of people who join a gym because they want to exercise and pay the money 6 months in advance. But 85% of the people drop out in 6 months' time. That means even they have the intent to exercise, they paid the money, but they don't move into action. So most of the human behavior problems that we have studied across the world is in the awareness action gap or intent action gap. And that's an area that my team works on. And whenever we have interventions that we provide at an unconscious level, I think we have realized that we are able to bridge that gap better because we are not much believers in conscious communication doing anything much to bridge the gap between awareness and action.
So I think thanks a lot. I think in the case of water, what is happening is more people taking for granted that nature will continue to give. This has become in our subconscious mind, which is not allowing us to take care of the warnings and move forward.
That is also because of a construction of our brain. There is a whole area called discounting of the future. Our brain is not good in judging the future, and also when the future is really far away. For that matter, I think studies shows that even when I'm thinking of my own future, people who just got about, say 5 years for retirement, if you ask them, do you need to take care of retirement? Of course, I need to do it. But I think studies have shown that when you think of your future self, just 5 years ahead, the parts of the brain that gets activated are the same parts that get activated when you think of a stranger, which means your present self and your future self don't have any emotional connection in your brain, which is your future self. You can well imagine about our future. Our brain is not good in thinking of what could happen in the future. Also, if it is what I call a risk or a problem, we are all very optimistic about the future. That's a construction of our brain, and we need to tackle that problem if we have to handle some of the issues like climate control and water problem, as you rightly mentioned. So,
thanks a lot, Mr. Biju. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Ramkumar. Now, question from Prabha. Prabha?
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Biju, very nice talk.
Thank you.
It was very enjoyable. I have actually two questions. One
Sure.
is, I think a lot of engineers and probably some of the engineers on this call are probably working on technologies in AI. So just what is really your advice to especially the young engineers? And I also want to know, it's not so much as the one is adoption of AI, but then the critical success factor is, when this whole thing is being designed and a solution is being designed and technology is being designed, you have to design the behavioral and ethical aspects into it, right? So it's not just about adoption of something at the end of it. So should the curriculums that we are having, should it not actually include behavioral and ethical aspects and not just the technology aspect of it, as our engineers are are learning and
Thank you for reminding me. Actually, I wanted to end on that.
Okay.
Actually, one of the things I wanted to mention was, I know when you were, I know we are just 4 years apart. I think the only paper that I really enjoyed, the only paper I enjoyed in my engineering days was RVG Menon's Humanity.
Yes. We had RVG Menon too.
Exactly. Now, if you look at it, off the 48 papers that we had just one paper in Humanities. But I would today say, based on Prabha, what you just mentioned, at least 25% to 30% of the papers in engineering education should be about human behavior, sociology, anthropology, how the culture and other areas. I think the good thing is that already in the new education policy, the government has done extremely good of actually talking about the need for multidisciplinary learning. I don't know if there are professors or anyone listening from our college here, but I would exhort the educationists to definitely include far more papers on human behavior as part of our engineering education. It's very, very important. Only then you can actually develop AI engineers who also, because AI engineers, 75-80% of them still be technology, but they still should know about the human brain. How does, the peculiarities, as Ajit was mentioning, biases, they're all things that they need to learn. And while they're learning also technology, is very important. Thank you for pointing out.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one more question. See, you mentioned about this gap between awareness and action. I think earlier questions on bias and all were also there. So this is, I think, a significant problem I think we all grapple with, whether it's in regular personal life or organizations. But do you think we have ways to prod people to action without actually even addressing the awareness part? Because we do see that in some cultures, people, once they are aware and they believe why something should be done, they will do it. But in other cultures, even if they are aware and they know, but they may still not do it due to various other reasons. So how do we, do you see we can just leave aside awareness and go straight to action? Is that a possibility?
I think that's what we do in a lot of our projects, where our traditional belief was that change attitudes and behaviors would change. But I think what we are saying today is that you change behaviors and attitudes would follow, because our brain also has a habit of sort of justifying our behavior, and so we use non-conscious solutions like what we did in railway and other things. What we found is that overall the safety consciousness actually goes up and people become more this. So I think that is what I strongly advise people. Like, for example, we worked on some of the issues on safety of women, for example, and we realized there are certain things that we can create in the context that actually makes it more easier for people not to do the wrong thing. One of the examples I have mentioned in my, for example, in my column is, for example, we talk about cleanliness. We say Indians we throw, and only in Switzerland and in Singapore we are clean, but not. But you go to all our metro stations and we don't throw a single paper out there. Just the other day, Railway had invited us discussing about how do we get people to maintain our railway stations and our coaches clean. I was telling them, we are inherently clean, and there are certain things that we do, what we've done in our metro stations, we can replicate that into our railway station. We should be able to get our people to behave in a certain way. The same is what attitude to women, for example. So a lot of these can be done at an unconscious level without, let's call the awareness, and then a behavior happens, and overall then the attitudes will slowly change post that.
Thanks, Biju, and hope you can get people to wear masks too.
Yes, I've been. I always felt that. I think in my column, I think I wrote at least 14 articles on COVID. I just felt that the COVID management was done in a very, very rational way, and we should have played up emotions of fear and other things far better than, and that would have helped us get people to wear the mask and all, and behave in a far better, far more responsible way. No doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabha. Next question from Mr. Neelakanthan.
Yeah, good evening. Well, Mr. Biju, that was a very interesting, brilliant delivery, and I think you have kindled a lot of curiosity among the listeners on AI. Now, actually, though I posted one question, it is actually becoming three, because as well, number one is, in robotic surgery, is AI the key technology applied, and how much is the role of the surgeon? That's question number one. Question number two is, how does the brain behave when it is challenged? Because I think it's more of the Western usage, in the behavior that is challenge. The word usage of the word challenge, especially when you're on a project. People say that the response is a lot more better when a challenge is thrown. That's number two. And third is impact of the digital media or the social media on the brain behavior, because today people say that, even for children in schools and all that, culture has changed much than it was, let's say, when we were in school or college. And a lot of that is the impact of the social media, why it has not become very safe for children, to move around and things like that. So these are the three questions.
Under the first question on surgery, I don't know. I'm not an expert. But since my colleagues in Cure has done an extremely good job on diagnostics, they have actually started with tuberculosis, but now they've moved into brain and other areas. I know in diagnostics, there is definitely AI is doing a very, very good job. And what are the other areas where AI is doing a good job in surgery and others? I have no idea. I'm not at all an expert in that area to actually make a statement on that. The second one, as far as challenge is concerned, I didn't completely grasp the question, but if it is all about confrontation and debates about it before an idea is thrown up, and the brain getting come out from there. Yes, as a brainstorming or innovation idea, I think two contradictory ideas and more contradictory ideas is always a good thing to have. And I would actually say good organizations are also organizations where multiple ideas are thrown around, and people are able to, our brain is able to listen to multiple ideas, and even contradictory ideas is actually very important for true innovation to really happen. And that's the second one I would actually talk about. And the third, I've written in my column multiple articles on the impact of social media on human behavior. I think my last article was on what is the 1 year when human beings did not really interact at a social level. And at the same time, right from digital shopping to a lot of other areas, we developed a lot of systems for people to be alone and then deal, in the loneliness of their homes. And what is the impact of that? And I have written an article saying that I think the era of individualism actually has come about. There's no doubt about it that social media has an impact on our culture, on our behavior, and I think last 1 year was a huge social experiment that has made us far more individual. Not so much because we actually want to be, individualistic, but some of these the owners of these technologies are now trying to make sure that you don't go out for shopping. You sit at home and then do the shopping. So today I know we work with a lot of corporates. A lot of companies are very happy to build what we call D2C, direct to consumer channels, instead of the typical channels across there. So there's a lot of changes happening, Nilakandan, in the interaction and in the culture between people. And I think individualism will have a stronger ride along than what it was before. That's what my reading is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neelakandan. We have one more question. This is from our Mr. Rajiv. Can we do that also with you?
Of course.
Thank you. Can you please raise the question? Yes.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Rajiv.
Yeah. Hi, Biju. I could hear only some part because of but it was brilliant as usual from you. Yeah, I have been, when dealing with autistic people, we use a technique called applied behavior analysis. For example, to address the behavioral issues, to correct is, I'm not sure the right term to use, but is generally used, correct the behavioral issues of autistic people. So, based on the work that you have done and based on the experience of your work you have done, is there any light you can throw on this? Because from behavioral analysis, whether the applied behavioral analysis rational or whatever is the right kind of approach to address the behavioral issues of autism.
Rajiv, we have worked in the area of e-learning, and one of the, I don't know, we have looked at this whole area of rewards, and what sort of rewards and how those rewards could actually be given to the people to get them to reinforce a certain behavior they were already doing. And some work has happened in that particular area. Maybe that could be of some help in this area.
Yeah, no. The applied behavior analysis also primarily based on a reward or a punishment system. Or punishment system. That is what it is. But we analyze the antecedent and see the antecedent, try to correct that antecedent which triggers a kind of behavior. So because primarily what is that with autistic people have got in their brain there are not right kind of networks, not enough synaptic networks. So what happens is the way how an antecedent, a normal human brain reacts to a kind of antecedent, but an autistic person may not, person's brain may not react in that way. So from that point of view, I'm just asking whether because
I don't have. I don't know. I haven't specifically that area. No, Rajiv. But I can look up some of these.
Yeah. I want to do some work in that area. That's where I was. Anyway, we can catch up later.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. So, with that, we have come to the end of our questions. That was an excellent session, Biju. I will now hand over to Shaji Thomas for the vote of thanks. Shaji?
Yeah. Thank you, Ajit, and all the participants. Good evening. I'm Shaji Thomas. I'm from 87 batchmate of Biju. And Biju, today you have taken us to the new wild west of the intelligence business. whatever you say, artificial intelligence coming into the software fold, the behavioral patterns of the humans being analyzed, and with that being put into use or used by the artificial intelligence to do the business. Yes, that's going to be the new world, and where the new generation will be taking part in each of these factors, artificial intelligence, human behavior study, or the business with which they will use this. Excellent way of presenting it. And I would say this was the Wild West. And I would say, like, when we passed out in 87 or something, we studied Pascal. And in the college, there was one artificial intelligence book. There was just question answer branching into different ways. That was what was the height of, like, you run the software and the software gives you the replies. That was, we thought, would be the artificial intelligence. Now it has gone to a different level. So you have come through that very nicely. I think almost 70 participants today might have had a new experience of the world or the future, which is where the technologies are going to be a part of. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ajit and Papan, for again hosting the today's session. And I would thank all the participants also. Today it was, I was just looking around 70 participants today. And everybody must have been enthused by your presentation. And I thank Pratibha also for doing the CETAA today also. It was a nice beginning. Yeah, calming everybody and then start the session. That was great. And all the questions, I think that is the future questions is going to be. And I think Biju has to work a lot on that questions. Thank you very much. And good evening from my side.
Thank you. Good night and thank you. Thank you, everyone.